if you would, one more, and then we have a question from Senator Roth.
So the way the bill is written, it doesn't word itself that way. Who actually is within the direct, how did you put it, sir? I apologize. Who actually works within the business. But be that as it may, the 3-year provision is already, the powers that be have already anticipated this, and they've already given them this benefit. So it's redundant. And that it is, you can't compare it to, because the federal government has such a there's vast agencies, a vast budget. DOD's budget is billions of dollars. The state of California does not have the resources that the federal government have. We only have 3% of the dollars that is decided to be set aside for disabled veterans.
Senator Roth and Senator Waso.
Well, I was a little confused with some earlier testimony, perhaps because my ear was plugged or something. But so we have a 3-year period. This bill allows, for the first time, someone impacted to enter into a new contract with government, provided that that contract can be completed or will be completed within the same 3-year block. So it doesn't extend the period. We're talking about 3 years, and the change now is, as before, we were talking about 3 years to wrap up old contracts. Now it's 3 years. It's still 3 years, but during the 3-year wind-down period, the spouse or family member can enter into a new contract as long as it's completed by the end of that same 3-year period. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct, and also the fact of the state receiving the credit for that.
Right. Now, one
Okay.
follow-up question. I'd like some information in a report back to this committee at some point, at some reasonable point in time, as to exactly how many businesses are impacted by this in the state of California. Maybe it's in here, but I didn't see the
The numbers that came across earlier from the testimony was, I believe, you said 6 this last year.
6.
6. So we're not looking at a large group of people. And the other issue I want to highlight is that everybody has levels of goals attainable for disabled veteran contracts, small contracts. Very few of them actually make that number. When I used to track that when I was over at the California Department of Veteran Affairs. They did the best, and we barely, we didn't make the number. So there's a huge push on trying to allow veterans to compete in contracts, because the whole issue of how a contract's written, the scope of the contract, what's a prime, how many other people sign on to it, the length of the contracts. There's a lot of hurdles that have to be met, and many times disabled businesses are small businesses, and they lack the capability to put together a proposal to be competitive. So this bill basically allows, if somebody has it, they can compete with the current contract, complete the job. But the good example I was using earlier today, if at 2000 the veteran died, and let's say the contract they had terminated at 2001, this business would be able to compete as a DVBE for the remaining 2 years and renegotiate another contract.
As long as it's completed by the end of that 3rd year.
And after the end of the third, but let's say if it was a larger contract, like say it's 4 years, then they could compete, but the state would only receive the value of giving it to a disabled business for the remaining 2 years. The state would not get any more credit for, let's say, if there's a 3 or 4 year contract that went beyond that portion of time.
Which is a little different than our summary.
That's right. Oh,
Because our summary says that the contracts can be completed within the 3-year period, but the summary's not the bill, so
That's
you
right.
drafted the bill, so I'll
Yeah.
defer to you on that.
So the point is, I was going to say is that, what is the overall objective of this bill? The overall objective of the bill is to allow a veteran who established a business to be able to have a transition to ensure that there's some economic viability within their family. And we felt 3 years would be the time. That's all it is. It's to take care of a spouse within the bill.
And just if I may, Mr. Chair, the fact that only 6 businesses utilize this provision, I don't know over what period of time, but it doesn't matter. 6 is hardly going to be devastating to the overall program in the state of California, at least on a statewide basis.
I would not think 6 would be overly challenging to the economy of the state.
If I may.
One more time, then we have a question
Sir,
from Senator
you
Wessel.
asked how many businesses will be impacted by this bill, and the information that was given gives you how many disabled veterans in the past have used the bill. So there's a big, difference in those numbers. The impact is much larger than 6 businesses.
read this.
And again, I want to reiterate that the law already gives the spouse and the child the right to continue the business for current contracts. The intent was to make the spouse and the child compete against disabled veterans who are living for new contracts. So again, we ask vehemently that you oppose this bill.
Let me read the exact language that I think is in question here on page 5. After the date of the majority owner's death or certification of permanent medical disability established by this subparagraph for the sole purpose of providing sufficient time to make orderly and equitable arrangement for the disposition of the business, except that the business shall not enter into any new contract, a disabled veterans business enterprise for the purpose of the program if the contract would not be completed within the 3-year program.
Within 3 years. So I was mistaken on that statement. It's within the 3-year program of the contract.
Yeah, so that seems pretty clear.
Yes.
Further, then, Senator Hueso.
Just generally, I'm going to encourage the committee, staff, and the author just to be consistent on the language of the bill, because I saw that in the bill and in the description of the bill, it makes reference to the family. And we should be very specific in terms of what we mean by family, because family can mean a lot of things. It makes reference to spouse and child. And I think if that's your intent of the bill, spouse and child, that language be substituted where it says family, should say spouse and child. Just to clarify that there are no ambiguities in terms of what family means.
I think
Definition of
Senator Hueso has
family.
made a good point. Assembly, would you be willing to allow that to be a part of your author amendment, the consistency?
Yes, I would, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just up to you, but as we move forward, should this be adopted, I would ask that you consider requesting some data input periodically to not only assess the impact of this on those surviving family members as they move forward during the 3-year period, but also to try to judge the impact on those other disabled veteran businesses as they attempt to compete for contracts.
Mr. Tremblay, are you out there? Could you give us some thoughts if your department might be capable of providing such data?
There you do it.
Mr. Chair, I believe we would
already
be
do
able
it.
to do that. Yes, we do collect some of the data currently on the program, so this would be another data point that would be collected in the process as we're going through with contracts and so forth.
And Senator Chavez, would that be okay as another additional amendment then that we would request of the department?
I think it'd make it stronger, and I know the department already collects that information, so
Okay.
we already have it.
Good. Okay. And now you, sir, you are in opposition. Please state your name.
Yes, my name is Donald Parks. I was actually one of the first DBBs in the state, worked with Mr. Lopez to put the bill together, and I really understand his intent and the message. My concern is that whatever we do, there's the veteran, and then there's the things that are not the veteran. And when there are not distinctions between the veteran itself, the person that got injured, and somebody that's not a veteran, and we have no distinction in the law, that's of concern. That we, the veteran, a child of a veteran, all they did is get born. The veteran got injured. And to have things that are equatable is of concern. And the spouse has some community property kinds of things. But it's of concern to me in terms of saying this person is equal to a veteran that got injured. It just doesn't feel right. That's my concern. And so you can have a program we have a program which has a certain percentage. It could be a different percentage. I mean, it doesn't have to be the same, but having exactly the same is saying something about, there shouldn't be anything equal to a disabled veteran in our process of recognizing that veteran and what they did for the country.
Do
It should
you
be
have an objection, though, that a spouse or a child for that limited period of time be a part of the succession?
Well,
It's been narrowed.
Right.
I mean, if it weren't already, the Assemblyman has taken pretty clear amended language that confines it to the spouse of that veteran and/or the child of that veteran, and yet that's further limited only for the duration of the contract.
yeah, and I'm just being consistent with law in general. You have, community property law, where the spouse has certain legal rights, but those are not the same rights as a child. There's differences. I'm just trying to be consistent with law in general and how we recognize rights. Certain things are inherited, but a wife has legal community property. We make no distinctions between those. It seems as there's something missing in equating these things. And, the point is, there's a certain, so many percentage you get for competing. That percentage doesn't have to be exactly the same. If you made a difference, it wouldn't be actually equating a disabled vet to, say, a child of a disabled vet. So I'm just all about equity here. Our laws need to say what we intended. And we say, and this child that was just born is equal to this disabled vet got injured. That just doesn't feel right.
I think I get your drift, sir, but I believe that the language as it is now before us does accomplish your aim. Do you have something you'd like to add, sir?
Yes, I do. First, when we talked about this extending to others than family, it extends to partnerships, because there's a lot of business out there who have formed partnerships with disabled veterans. And the disabled veteran is merely the figurehead. Now, this wife will assume that figurehead role, and the partnership will continue on without anything. This will impact every disabled veteran company that is competing against that now non-disabled veteran-led partnership. The Colonel mentioned that this bill was limited to active participation of family members. I do not see that verbiage in the bill itself. When I die, I will not be leaving a homeless, starving widow. I've taken steps to take care of that without this program. I don't trust this program to take care of my family. What I will be doing, though, is I'm going to have my son provide for the orderly and equitable disposition of the business. He's 33 years old. He lives in Idaho. He spent 8 years in prison. Every summer, he's going to come back to California, and he's going to temporarily control and fully operate the business. He will take monies that would have gone to disabled veterans and go back to Idaho at the end of the summer. He will do this for a total of 3 years. I feel that he will be taking monies from intended disabled veterans, but through the magical powers of this bill, he will not be competing and not conflicting with the intended purpose of the program. I'm urging a no vote, but if you decide on yes, then I want to thank you on behalf of my son for giving him the opportunity to obtain these monies intended for disabled veterans. I know he will be very pleased to take it, regardless of which disabled veteran lost out. Again, please vote no, and if it is amended to a active participation, all I need to do is put him on the checking account, and he's got active participation. There's ways around everything in this program, and it's highly utilized to the benefit of someone. The idea of this survivorship is not new in 2014. This, as far as I can date back, was in 2012. Ken Shoemate from Stay Safe. This has been one of his goals for the past 4 years. So I'm urging a no vote for one of the reasons I stated. For every dollar that my son takes from this program, a veteran lost out.
Thank you for your testimony.
Comment on that?
Yeah, of course you can, Assemblyman.
One of the most contentious issues I ran across when I was over at California Department of Veteran Affairs was the DVE program. There is a lot of emotion in the area. A lot of people said, who's disabled, what percentage disabled, it was a big issue. And that's why I think there'd probably be some good discussion talking about the DVB certification requirements. We have a person here that could come talk to you about it if there's any questions about it. But the establishment of the certification to be a DVB is pretty onerous. It's a challenge. But as I said earlier, even with that, we don't meet the levels which we establish in the state or the feds. So we put this really tough program together. We have a lot of people fighting it. And the reality is we're not even getting all the contracts that are there. And so if the end objective that we did this was to help veterans and to help their families, we're not making that. This actually opens it up to allow families to continue to provide their support. So it's an emotional issue. I understand that. Veterans like, I'm being one myself, being also disabled myself. We like to say, segment ourselves. I think, though, that for the good of the military community, this bill meets that, and I'd ask for it to go forward.
Senator Roth, let's Senator Roth.
I don't want to belabor this, and I'm obviously going to support it. I do want to take a look at the data that comes in. I'm concerned, I heard the word partnership, and then I'm certainly not an expert on this, although I am a veteran, but not an expert on this subject. But I'm looking at the bill, and it talks about publicly owned business. Publicly owned business to me means a publicly traded business. I see the words joint venture, parent corporation. I don't know how all that plays out. So I'm going to be taking a look at the data that we received to make sure that we are truly benefiting those that we're attempting to benefit here by allowing them an orderly period of time to unwind a business and not benefiting some larger joint venture or publicly traded corporation simply because the 51% stockholder happens to be a disabled veteran. Not that that's not a worthy undertaking, but I think we need to limit what we do, so.
And you picked up on the really key point, Senator. We had to have all those terms when I got involved in this some years ago, what are we trying to do here? And there are examples of abuse. There's major corporations, some big company will take a veteran, have them put them on the title, and the person stays home, doesn't do any work, and the company's running forward. There are abuses out there. And so that's why it's such a wide-reaching area. But that's why we had the DVB Alliance. That's why there's so much emotion around this, and this is just an attempt to take care of the family
Two more
members.
comments?
Yeah, of course. Let's, are you through?
I'm done.
Please, you have an additional comment to respond to Senator Roth.
He did. He made a statement, and I was going to respond, and I just lost it,
Okay.
which is a bad thing. I'm 62. But to deal with the partnerships, that's who's going to benefit, is these large major corporations who figurehead a disabled veteran. They're going to be able to continue to stay in business and compete against living disabled veterans trying to make a living wage for their family.
Well, let's go back over the sense of the amendment that's going to limit this to the spouse and child.
Then it should say sole proprietorship.
And you start going into different types of businesses. That's
Well,
what the
I'm a
senator
little
says.
wary of that because you're limiting the spouse or the child some business opportunity. I don't necessarily, I think that can be reconciled with not being a denial of opportunity for any other veteran. I think that's going to have to be worked on, and that may be such a, well, we've taken, the author has taken such an amendment, and the intent is to draw it as tightly as possibly can be drawn. Is that correct, Assemblyman?
That's correct. That's why we took the amendments, and we appreciate them.
Further, anything you want to add, sir?
It's not tight. It's still wide open.
Do you have some actual language that you preferred?
I didn't know I was going to have, well, if we want to limit it to spouse and child, then yes, a sole proprietorship owned by a spouse or child. That would limit it to the spouse or child. Anything other than that opens it up to partnerships using disabled veterans as figureheads, which the colonel has already accepted as a fact. And we're just going to perpetuate that fraud and abuse under this program.
Well, the Assemblyman's dealt with it in a very personal way over at the Department of Veterans Affairs, and this has been around since around 1989 by my reckoning. So I'm of the mind that with the amendments that we can reconcile these interests. And whether the reporting that will be provided under the amendment suggested by Senator Roth, we're assured that we're going to be taking even a more careful look as we proceed. Maybe in the ensuing years, in the last 20-some years, we haven't, the department and everyone else has not paid enough attention to it. I think that's what this hearing is accomplishing, a much greater scrutiny. I think that's what your testimony is accomplishing, sir. I would look at that as being helpful.
Thank you, sir.
And I'd be willing, if there's anything you think that we dropped, come back. I got another year to do another, clean it up. Come back and work with me on it.
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I even called your office.
Okay.
But
I'm
they
glad
were,
you-
they were confused as to what the bill meant.
Thank you.
I know Assemblyman Chavez was a man of his word, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like to give a close?
I ask for your aye vote, please.
Call the roll. Do we have amendment? I mean, do we have a motion, excuse me?
Yeah, Janet, I mean,
What do we miss?
There is an amendment.
Yeah.
In the amendment, could you clarify that amendment? It's the limit to spouse and child.
Yeah.
The bill does limit to spouse and child. It would be to clarify further that it limits to spouse and child. It actually is limited to spouse and child now, but this amendment's to further clarify that that's the case.
Well, he's suggesting that and I thought that was the intent, that it further clarifies what we already have in the bill. Now, the confusion was some of the other verbiage that has been cited here. And you suggest in the history of the bill, Assemblyman, those words kind of crept in, if you will.
we use the word family. Senator Wasa wanted spouse and child. The bill actually refers to spouse and child. I think the actual word is family. I don't have it right in front of me anymore, the bill, but I believe it already had it, spouse and child, in the bill with your amendments.
Yeah.
Sir, may I ask?
Yeah,
May I
please,
ask
please.
to make a clarifying comment?
Go ahead.
If you look at the bill.
Right.
If you have a copy of the bill on page 5, if you have the bill proper, line 21 through 40, it states that the provision is limited to spouse and children in the bill as it is right now. So I think
You get the bill?
that an amendment could only further clarify that. There's intent language
It's shown here.
earlier on in the bill, in section 1, that makes a vague reference to families. That's a general descriptor, and that is not binding law. That could be clarified, too.
What are you recommending now? I had 3 people talking to me at one time.
Just repeat, this would be the sense of the amendment, or the specificity of the amendment, actually.
My understanding, based on the discussion between the members of the committee and the author, the bill's binding language already limits it to spouse and child. What we could do is further clarify that in the actual language where that's mentioned. The other thing that may be creating some confusion is that the intent language, which is not binding, but merely generally descriptive, makes a reference to family members. And that could be clarified more specifically to spouse and child, but that's not actually binding language, that's just generally descriptive, but may be contributing to the,
And then it's
Confusion.
consistent, and then could not be construed in any other way, even in the intent language. And intent language does have some force and effect in laws.
Okay, so under section 1, subparagraph 2, in the area you have family members, you would say spouse and child. Okay, I'm fine with that.
And that's just the intent language, the actual bill
Yeah.
says.
All right, are we clear of the amendment?
Yes.
All right.
I am.
Senator Nguyen has moved the bill. Secretary will call the roll.
AB 413 do pass as amended, but first we refer to appropriations. Nielsen.
Aye.
Nielsen, aye. Weso. Allen. Nguyen. Nguyen, aye. Roth.
Aye.
Roth, aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Assemblyman Fraser. You want to do the consent? Okay, go ahead. Pardon? Well, we go by order. I thought that's what.
Do you want me to do consent or?
Go ahead, go and move consent. You want to move? Yeah.
I'll move the consent.
Going to move the consent calendar. And Secretary, call the roll on this consent calendar. We may be losing some members. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Do pass, but first we refer to appropriations with recommendation to consent calendar. Nielsen.
Aye.
Nielsen, aye. Weso. Allen. Nguyen.
Aye.
Nguyen, aye. Roth. Roth, aye.